All right, milling out our rabbits and dados to create the drawer for our project is going to be kind of complicated. We're going to break a lot of rules that we learned on the first day in here, so we got to know how to do that properly. If you're lucky, you've been given a strip of Baltic birch 1/2-inch plywood and a smaller 1/4-inch panel to act as our drawer bottom and drawer sides. Okay, cut them out to the correct dimensions on the plans. So that we have 2 shorter pieces and 2 longer pieces. Okay? We're going to start with our shorter pieces so we can put our longer pieces off to the side. To get our machine set up here is actually really one of the hardest things to do. So I'm going to lift this guard up, pull up this finger pull right here, put that off to the side, and then deep down here in the machine where no one can see right now is a gray handle. I'm going to lift that up to the sky. That's going to loosen that riving knife that carries the rest of the guard. I'm going to set that off to the side, push that gray handle down. There's a little door that probably opened on you when you lifted the handle up. We're going to close that as well. It's just going to help with dust collection. Reinstall my insert, and I need to be flush to the table here. If it's sticking up anywhere in these corners, slip this back up, give it a little jiggle so that it is flush on all these corners. Okay? Now, first thing we're going to do is to get the blade height. And Mr. Cameraman, please zoom in right here, because plywood actually gives us a really good opportunity to measure up halfway of a 1/2 inch, which is a 1/4 inch, and that's what our blade height needs to be. Rather than grab our tape measure out here and try to do this number, I'm just going to look up the halfway point of this plywood because there's layers. I can go in and count them and be pretty certain halfway is going to be about right there. I'm not going to worry about my fence yet. I just want to double check my blade height here. My miter gauge hangs off the front of the machine. I'm going to use that in the miter slot right here. My wood is going to be tight up against the fence on the miter gauge. My hands are going to ride right here in the same line as the miter slot right here. I'm not going to be scared off to the side. Both hands are right on top of each other, pushing tight down to the table and tight back to that miter gauge fence. Okay? Let's check that blade height. Pretty good. I'm about halfway right there. That's going to make our math a lot easier going on if we're exactly halfway through that plywood. Okay? Now I need to be concerned about fence distance. This is another rule that we get to break. We've been trained to measure from the fence to the inside of the blade. We're going to actually measure to the outside of the blade. And I'm just going to get it close with my tape. After that, I'm going to use the actual board that I'm going to join together for my fence setup. Okay? The base of this board should line up with the outside of the blade. This is the best way that I've found to do this, so that we don't have to spend a million years getting this set up. But do take your time. Do not do this when there's 5 minutes left in the hour. Rabbets and dados are something that should be done well at the beginning of the hour, giving yourself all the time in the world to get this set up, to work with buddies, so that we're doing it safe and we're not doing it rushed. All right, let's double check that here. See, I got 2 cuts in here now, and now just eyeballing this right here, I'm going to have a nice joint. Okay, you see me do a couple cuts at this point. All right, I've made that first cut right there. But now actually doing the rabbets is something I want you to start on a scrap piece to start. Okay, so have yourself a scrap board. Talk about all that in a second here, okay? Because you saw me break some rules right there. Okay, that's what I like. I want to practice on a scrap board. Now, let's take a look at our actual pieces here. All right, so after I have done all of my machine setup, all right, I'm going to actually grab my side pieces right here. I'm going to put rabbets on each end of the sides, just like you saw me do with that scrap board. To start out, I'm going to have this board tied up against each fence. Okay, that's kind of a complicated setup right here, but basically my left hand is pushing backwards in this direction, holding it tight to this fence, and keeping it snug up against this fence. My right hand is driving it through the blade. After that first one, I'm going to sneak it off this fence just a little bit, all right, about the width of the blade, and I'm going to drive through there again. Okay, so on and so forth until just about all of that material is cut out. After that, actually let's just go with that. I've got a majority of the material actually removed. I'm not going to use any kind of chisels or sandpaper. We're going to use the blade to clean this up. Okay? These are going to be cuts where you're actually cutting on the backstroke through that blade. Okay? It looks like this. I cleaned it out a little bit more, and honestly this is probably good. But I like some true clean out cuts where I'm actually going to be holding this piece over the blade and moving it left to, I can't do it right now, but I'm going to move it left to right laterally, which is going to make this ultra smooth. Very important, we're tight against this miter gauge fence the entire time. That's pretty good. All right, let's do the other side now. Keep in mind that rabbit is going to go underneath here. Okay, so I need to be worried about what is on this side as well. Okay, this rabbit should be pointed down. Okay, don't make that mistake. If you do, you're going to have to remake your side of this. Here it is again in real time. There we have it. Okay, two identical rabbits on each end of the side piece, utilizing the same fence setup and the same blade setup. If you try to do this on separate days or separate setups, it's going to be challenging. So I'm going to go through and do my other side here as well. Thing too, as you start to get good at this, make sure you're holding tight down to the table. If I'm not holding tight down, this could actually lift up off of the table, could cause kickback, but it could also cause that joint to not be flat all the way across. So it won't be a tight joint later on. So I want to make sure I'm pushing down as well as holding tight to the fences at appropriate times. Pretty fun. You're just going to start to get pretty good at this. All right, and if that's the case, when we make that rocking chair later on in your cabinetry career, we're going to be doing this an awful lot. You guys will get pretty good at this. Okay. And on that front, we're only going to use these two table saws right here. We're not going to actually use our Rabbit and Dado saw for this, just these table saws up here. Now my sides are just about done. I need to actually bring up my front and back and my 1/4 inch panel, okay? To do the dado in these 4 pieces, I'm no longer going to use the miter gauge. I can put that back. But I need to have this panel right here. My 1/4 inch panel is going to be necessary to help size these dados, okay? Now, I haven't touched the machine setup since I started here, and I'm not going to until I put a dado in all 4 of these pieces here. We're going to go back to following the rules, okay? All right, let's start with the front. Let's put our front side forward, okay? This is going to feel like a normal cut, but if you notice, with the blade height, I'm not actually going to cut all the way through this piece, okay? In fact, I might actually clip the end of the push stick on here. That is okay. That's what they are for. I'd much prefer the push stick rather than your hand. Okay, so this dado cut is going to look just like this. There's one. I'm going to do all 3 of them now. It's important that the rabbets are facing down when we put the dado on our side pieces. Notice my left hand on this. It's holding that board tight down to the table and tight to the fence while I cut. There's my first round. Notice I nailed this push stick. That's okay. Far better the push stick than your hand. Now, here's my panel. This thing should just drop right in there. Oh no, and it doesn't. Okay? This blade is 1/8 of an inch. This panel is 1/4 of an inch. So it's going to take at least 2 times cutting through here to widen this dado so that this panel just drops in. At no point are we going to get a hammer and try to beat this thing in here. Okay? This should all fit together like a puzzle. And if you follow these instructions and you take your time doing this, we shouldn't have an issue. All right, so I'm going to move this fence just a little bit that way. And Mr. Cameraman, if you could really zoom in here, we can see this best right here. I'm going to try to accomplish this on just 2 cuts. Most of you guys will need 3. That's okay. It's 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, so I want to get out of here, so I'm going to try and do this in just 2 cuts, okay? And again, I move that fence that way. Here it is again. Don't make this mistake. You won't have to start over, but you will be laughed at. Ready? Moment of truth here, folks. You are not to walk away from the saw until this panel drops into every one of your dados, and mine doesn't. Okay, let's push that fence just a little bit more that way, towards the wall, to open up that dado into the meat of your drawer. All right. for sure I'd have it, folks. All right. That's what we want to see, folks. That dado totally accepts this panel. I'm going to check on all four. Do not leave the saw until you check on all four that your joint will hold in that panel. Additionally, you'll notice that this panel has been initially cut or cut by you to the wrong size. It's too big. It's by design. That's going to be your next video on how to fit the drawer.